Andreja and I talked about my topic for the day should be, and we actually had a little debate. and what I'm going to talk about is something I've been talking about for 30-some years. You would think I would be done with it by now. But what has happened in the last 24 months is that some of my oldest, best clients have called up and said, come talk to us about paradigms again. I said, why? I spent, in some cases, years with these clients, teaching them about the idea. And they said it's because the young ones use the term but do not understand the subtleties of it. And so I said, that makes sense, I will do that. And I think we had the same conversation. Now, for our youth who are here, our young adults who are here, I actually talked to them yesterday about paradigms, but I talked about it from the point of view of a paradigm shifter, as if they were the ones who were going to change the paradigms. Today I'm going to change the angle on that, and I said to them it will be somewhat different than they heard yesterday, because I want to talk to you who are leaders, and how as leaders you can affect the ability and the environment to deal with new paradigms and change paradigms. So this is really a leadership discussion on the importance of paradigms. 1994, I think it was, Scott Adams' assistant called me up. Scott Adams draws Dilbert. And he said, would you mind if we did a cartoon strip on paradigms? And I said, I don't own the word, you can do whatever you want. This is what we ended up with. And it has a message to it, okay? My project is a whole new paradigm. What's a paradigm? What's a paradigm? Funny. Seriously, what is it? You know, paradigm, paradigmish. As in, this project is a paradigm. But enough about my project. Tell me about your project. It's a paradigm. My project's a paradigm too. They bought it. Here's what I'd like to do today, especially speaking to you from a leadership position, your leadership position. We use the term a lot. It is softly understood. I'd like to focus on some things that are pretty hard about the idea that will allow you to, in fact, lead the discussion about paradigm shifts in your own organization, in your own for-profit or not-for-profit organization, and literally at a national level if you want. I always like to acknowledge the gentleman who got me started. His name was Thomas Kuhn, who wrote a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. If you want to read the seminal book that started the whole discussion, this is the book you would read. The one dilemma with it is that Thomas Kuhn said paradigms only worked for science. Everything else was in what he called the pre-paradigmatic stage. My work and what I tried to do, and I think fairly successful, is to show that in fact his idea was much larger than he knew himself. And so today I will not be talking just about paradigms in science, I'll be talking about a breadth of paradigms and why they're important. Okay, so what we're going to do is to get you as leaders to understand how you can do better with this idea as it's coming. Little chart here. It's a graph for leadership. Vertical axis is the breadth of responsibility. Horizontal axis is present to the future. Let me show you, first of all, the followership graph. And the way you would read that is that if I'm a follower, if I'm somebody who's following you as a leader, my responsibilities lie mostly in the present and then taper as we head toward the future. For how many does that make sense? Raise your hand, please. Okay? Because if you think about it, we hire people to do things today, right? We need it done today, so that's my focus. How do you think we draw the line for leaders? Now, if you read this right, it says, I, as a leader, have very little responsibility for the present. I have great responsibility for the future. Does that make sense? Okay, how many of you leaders say you drew the line wrong, Joel? It's a straight line all the way across the top. Anybody was thinking that as you saw the line? Okay, it's an easy error to make as a leader. Two problems with that position. Number one, why'd you hire these people to take care of the present if you're going to be always responsible for it? So in fact, you're taking away their meaning and their responsibility. Number two, how many hours in a day do you have? So if you're doing your job as a leader, you're actually thinking a lot more about the future than you are about the present. Leaders do have problems thinking about the future, though. President Grover Cleveland, sensible and responsible women do not want to vote. 1905. There is no likelihood that man can ever tap the power of the atom. Robert Millikan, who won a Nobel Prize in Physics. Who the hell wants to hear actors talk? That was Harry Warner of Warner Brothers Pictures, 1927. I hope you're noticing a pattern with our leaders' predictions here. No woman will hold a significant post, not foreign minister or prime minister, at least not in my time. Margaret Thatcher. In the computer industry, there's never been a company that's led the way in 2 successive eras. Bill Gates. By the way, he's right, Microsoft has it, but who did, by the way? Apple. Few corporations are able to participate in the next wave of technology because they are blinded by the business at hand. That's not a prediction, that's a description from Edson DeCastro, and I would suggest that in that statement he has caught the dilemma that we're going to talk about. Okay. So, 21st century leaders cannot be successful without a deep understanding of fundamental change. Fundamental change is paradigm shift change. So as I talk about this will help you deal with those kinds of root changes that are so important. We'll get our definitions right now. This is the definition I wrote. It's held pretty well. Paradigm is a system of rules and regulations that does 2 things. First of all, part of those rules define boundaries or set limits. It says you don't go beyond this, you don't do this, you don't do that, you do this. And then secondly, it tells you how to behave inside the boundaries so as to achieve some measure of success. There are 2 simple metaphors for this that make sense. Number 1, the rules of the game. If you think about any game you've ever played, even as a kid when we created our own games, we always created the boundaries, remember? Put your shirt over there, I'll put my shoe over there, this will be the boundary before we're going to play the game. And then the rules inside the boundaries tell you how to behave to achieve some measure of success playing that game inside those boundaries. You cannot walk onto a soccer field with a tennis racket. Okay? That's not the rule. You have to play the game. Now, field of expertise is another short way of thinking about paradigms. Think of the word field. What does that suggest? Boundaries, right? And what am I expert at? I'm expert at solving problems inside the boundaries. And by the way, that's the way we measure success. Equally true in sports, by the way. A great forehand put-away is a solution to a problem, isn't it? Okay, so the important thing about paradigms, the most important thing is they are problem-solving mechanisms that allow us to identify a problem and say, oh, it's one of those, and I have some rules for solving that. And that's why they are so important and so powerful, because they make us efficient problem solvers. Now, what we're going to talk about today is what happens when paradigms change. By the way, these are some synonyms: model, theory, pattern, mindset, dogma. That, by the way, is kind of arranged from most flexible to least flexible. Dogma, you don't dare challenge. Theories, you have a right to challenge. We've also seen terms from Schumpeter and Drucker and Andy Grove and Clayton Christensen using terms that, in fact, are variations on the theme of the paradigm shift. And one more thing before I get started. Organizations are not a paradigm, they are forests of paradigms. And so there's many paradigms interacting inside an organization. By the way, since it's in a sense an ecology of paradigms, if we change one paradigm, one place in the organization, what has to happen? Ripples all the way through the organization, doesn't it? So when somebody says, don't worry about us making this change, what should you do? You should worry. That is correct. That's right. Okay. 2 kinds of change: trend change, paradigm shift change. Trend change is more and less of stuff, and therefore handleable and measurable and quantifiable. Paradigm shifts are not that way. All right. So, paradigms are important because they trigger the most important kind of change. They trigger cascades of new innovations. They set trends, start trends moving, and they are the hardest to spot early. Here's an example of some recent paradigm shifts. And I want to note this, no, I took that one off. I'm sorry I did that. Flat screen TV, antimicrobial peptides, it's a biological paradigm shift. Wikipedia is an informational paradigm shift. Stem cell, again, another biological one. Hybrid electric cars, transportation, Facebook, the social media paradigm shift, the cloud, and the one I left off there is microloans. All right. We're going to address 4 questions. Question number 1, what causes the paradigm to shift? Question number 2, what kind of person is a paradigm shifter? How can we identify them, especially as a leader? How do you deal with them? Number 3, how does shifting paradigms affect those people who go through it? Again, as a leader, if you don't understand how paradigm shifting causes change in people, you will miss something important. And number 4, what happens to those individuals and organizations who are unable to go through the paradigm shift? In fact, stay with the old paradigm. Question number 1 is, what causes the paradigm to shift? In order to deal with that, I'm going to show you a graph. This is a graph that I put together early in my discussions about paradigms, and it's held true for, well, until now. Horizontal axis, time. Vertical axis, problem solved. What I'm going to do is show you the life cycle of a paradigm. First thing we notice is it does not start at 0, 0. It starts up a little bit, because the way it starts is somebody solves a couple of problems in a funny way. Funny means they're not using the prevailing paradigm to do it. And they typically make an internal comment to themselves, something like, wow, I didn't know I could do it that way. Maybe I've got something here. That is the way a new paradigm starts. It's a sense of something, in a sense that it's different than what was the old way to solve the problem. Then it evolves the following way. The first stage is a relatively gentle slope, because we are not solving problems yet. We're trying to figure out the rules, going from, hey, maybe I've got something here, to an understanding of what the rules are and the boundaries are. So as leaders, if you're working with one of your people or a group of your people who are working on a new paradigm, if they're in this A phase, you should not be asking for a new problem solved. That's not really what's happening there. You should say to them, how are the rules coming? And if they say, well, it's getting clear, we're seeing the boundaries, it's starting to make more sense, then they're doing exactly what they have to do. And as a leader, you need to support them. The B phase is what we always want in the A phase, but we can't get it because we don't know the rules well enough. But once we have the rules, the basic fundamentals down, then what we begin to do is solve problems. And what we do is we start solving the problems that are easiest, because we're pretty simple on this, right? And then we begin to evolve up the B curve. A lot of money is made on this curve at this point. A lot of industries grow at this rate when the new paradigm comes. Ultimately, however, we end up to the C section of the curve. We now see the famous S-shaped curve. What's happening in C is the rate of problem solving is slowing down for a very simple reason. Because we have automatic, in fact, it's just human nature. We solve the easy problems first, therefore what we have left at the very end are the hardest problems. So it takes longer to solve. There's a second measure too, by the way, which is they cost more to solve too. So when you get into the C section of your paradigm, you notice that the cost per problem solved starts to skyrocket. All right, that is the lifespan of a paradigm. Now, I'd like to just try something out on you. Think about where you are in your own level of expertise. I'd like to ask you to place yourself on this curve. How many are somewhere in A? That is, you're working on a new paradigm and you're just getting the rules squared away. Well, raise your hand if you're in A. Okay? How many say, no, actually I'm in B. I've got a great paradigm. It is doing really well. We're very efficient, effective. How many are in the B phase of their paradigm? Okay? How many are in C? The problems are starting to get a lot harder. They're a lot more challenging. The price is going up. Okay, now, you can't turn around and see all this, but we have people in all 3 areas. And what's interesting is how quickly we can place ourselves in that. So it's something we can personally identify with. Now, where do you think along that line the next paradigm is going to come? And now we'll take a different vote. I'm going to give you 3 choices. The next paradigm to replace this one that we just abstractly discovered, would it show up? Now we're talking likelihood. What's the likelihood of it showing up in A? The likelihood of it showing up in B? Or the likelihood of it showing up in C. Let's do a vote. How many say, I think that the likelihood is that the next paradigm will show up in A somewhere? Raise your hand if you think A is the likely time. Okay, how many say somewhere in B is the likely time? How many say somewhere in C is the likelihood? Raise your hand, please. Okay, let's do B again, please. Okay, C. B one more time. The exercise is good for it. C wins by a large margin. The correct answer is B. And this is the first major learning as a leader that you have to understand. New paradigms show up while the old paradigm is still doing very well. Therefore, what's the logical response when it shows up? You're not interested. And the reason you're not interested is because there's no need for it. There's no perceived need, okay? So it shows up sooner than it's needed. It shows up sooner than it is wanted. And therefore, unless you as a leader know what's going on, the logical, rational thing will be, we don't need new rules. Why would you show up? You know, we're not interested. If you're going to think about your future, do you see the advantage of knowing the first time that it shows up, rather than waiting? Because this is the typical time that we respond. When C becomes crisis, we start looking for a different way to solve problems. Notice how much time has passed that we could have used productively and efficiently to get the next paradigm developed. All right, now the question for that, I think that's an important thing to know. They show up sooner than we're needed. And I'll give you some examples of that as we move along here. The question is why? And Thomas Kuhn, in his book, I think one of the most important things he did in that book is to show how this happens and why it happens. Here's what he points out. As we're working up the B part of that curve, do we solve 100% of the problems we attack? And the answer is no. Nothing's perfect. But we really solve a lot. We're way over 500. Okay, we're way over 50% of the solution. So we have a very good feeling about the paradigm we're using. When we don't solve a problem, we set them aside. And they begin to accumulate. We make a promise to ourselves about these problems, by the way. What is it? Yeah, we can't work on them right now, but we'll get back to them. Do we get back to them, by the way? Yes, you do. You'd be amazed how often people will turn, come back again, and take another shot at it. Because in many ways, these are important problems. Well, here's what Thomas Kuhn says. There's a very good reason why we can't solve those problems. Number one, because of the lack of proper tools. You don't have the equipment to solve those problems. Just let's get to the punchline. Two things. You lack the proper tools. And I'll show you the Da Vinci robot machine as an example of all of a sudden, with that new set of tools, certain kinds of surgery can be done in a fundamentally better way, all right? Second thing he said, you're not smart enough yet. If you think about that curve, you've attacked a problem at this level of your experience that's actually much higher. You need to be much more sophisticated about your paradigm to solve it. So here's what happens. Kuhn says, you get better tools, problems come off the shelf. You get smarter, problems come off the shelf. But a subset of those problems keep going back up. Everything you try does not allow you to solve those problems. And it turns out there's a reason for that. Because the paradigm you're practicing isn't built to solve those problems. You will need to come up with a new paradigm to deal with those. And what I like about this is those problems are identifiable. And it says they are the catalysts for triggering the next paradigm. Okay? So every paradigm covers the problems it cannot solve, thus setting the stage for the paradigm shift. Now, it doesn't tell you what the new rules are. It just simply says, these are the problems you ought to be taking a look at. Remember at the very beginning when that person solved a couple of those problems in a funny way? Where do you think those problems came from? Off that shelf. Those were the problems they solved. Gee, I didn't know I could do it that way. Okay. All right, so from a leader's point of view, number one, it's important in your organization to look through your departments, to look through the fields of expertise in your organization, and have people locate themselves on the curve. A, B, C, very different behaviors, but what you want to know is one other thing. What are the problems that are not being solved? So make a list of the problems you wish you could solve, and you don't have a clue how to do it. In fact, I recommend, as a leader, when you lead this discussion, you start off with your own list. Here are some problems I wish I could solve, and I don't have a clue how to do that. Because then that shows you're serious about it. You really want that information out. Then the third thing I recommend is make them public, internally public. So people can take a look at what are the problems that you can't solve. You'll see why that's important in a minute. All right, so in the 21st century, this would be, in fact, ideal behavior. A to B, see the new paradigm, start developing it. Just as C starts, you're already moving into B on the next paradigm, and so you go A to B, A to B, A to B. There is no C. Think about the competitive advantage you have if you're always going A to B and your competitor's going A, B, C. Oh, what am I going to do? Question number 2. What kind of person discovers a new paradigm? Who is a paradigm shifter? How can we recognize these people? Person most likely to change your paradigm or my paradigm, because I'm teaching you about paradigms. I'm teaching you the paradigm. I am. Is someone who knows little or nothing about your paradigm. They are naive. They are innocent. Now, this is very frustrating because think about this person showing up and saying, hey, you need to change all these rules that are so successful for you. Remember, number one, they show up too soon. Number two, they basically don't have any credibility. What's the logical response when someone with no credibility shows up and says, hey, you got to change all your rules? It's rejection, isn't it? And that's what happens. Why do we reject them? They lack credibility. Why do we reject them? Because they challenge authority. This is our successful paradigm. We are who we are, and we do what we do because of this paradigm, and here you are telling us we're going to have to change. If we treat them the best, we say to them, look, come here, I will teach you how you really do it around here. And then we won't have this problem anymore. So there are 4 kinds of outsiders. This is important for you as a leader to understand, because these are the places you look. How do you recognize them? Number 1, young person fresh out of training. Okay. Number 2, older person shifting fields. They're inside your organization, but they were in sales, they're now going into R&D. They were in R&D, they're going into sales. I really don't care where they're going, but they're leaving a field that they're very good at, and they're moving into a field they know very little about. They're fresh, okay? Now, remember I said make your list of unsolved problems? One of the things you do is you share those problems with these people, especially this 2 groups. Here's a set of problems we've been working on. Pick one and take a shot at it, because you want them to do it without the prejudice of having learned the prevailing paradigm. General Electric, back in the 50s, actually went for almost 20 years, had this joke that they played on all their illumination engineers. First day they'd say, we want you to work on this problem. See this light bulb? And they would turn it on. The guy had one on his desk. It would light up and you could almost see the filament. He said, we need you to develop a coating that will smooth that out so that you not only cannot see the filament, but it glows evenly all the way across. These people would go off, work for a couple of weeks, come back and say, geez, I just can't get it. And they'll all have a big laugh because nobody could get it. It was an impossible problem. Then sometime in the early 50s, the young man came back and said, is this what you're looking for? And the guy said, yeah, that's it. He had solved the impossible problem. GE was accidentally doing what I think is important, give somebody who's got a fresh look a chance at solving the problem. 3rd category, Maverick Insider. We heard his speech. Mr. Turk read his speech. You know, if there was ever a Maverick Insider, it was Steve Jobs. And then 4th, a tinkerer. A tinkerer is someone who's so far outside the area of your expertise that he's going to talk to you about that you actually don't know how to have a conversation with him. Because you can't make any connection, and I'll illustrate that, okay? Now, a couple of stories of outsiders. This guy is Barry Marshall. The guy next to him was Robert Warren. Barry Marshall is the guy who discovered Helicobacter pylori as a cause of ulcers. He won a Nobel Prize for it. The only reason he worked on that project is as a brand new intern in the Perth General Hospital, or the Royal Hospital of Perth, that's what it was. He was such a pain that the other doctor said, oh, give him that crazy, you know, connect him with crazy Robin Warren, who keeps saying he's finding bacteria in stomach tissue. When we know that the acid of the stomach absolutely makes that impossible. I won't go into the long story of it, but basically Barry Marshall and Robin Warren working together, but it was really Barry Marshall, the person who didn't have any paradigms about this, discovered that this bacteria could in fact exist in the acidic environment of the stomach, and it was causing the ulcers. He discovered that bismuth and a specific antibiotic, which I cannot remember, taken, could cure it in 72 hours. So he cured 100 people in Australia, took the case to the World Gastroenterology Conference, made his presentation, and got thrown out. Because it couldn't possibly be an infection. They had all worked on the bubbling pumps and all, you know, all the Prilosec stuff. Outsider, fresh out, didn't know any better, changed paradigm. Howard Head, I talked about this yesterday, but it's worth relating. Howard Head invented head skis, the steel edge skis. He then retired, sold it, made a lot of money, decided to take up tennis. Went for his first lesson. At the end of his first lesson, he walked up to his tennis pro and said, why the hell are these so small? And the pro said, well, because I think it's in the rules. He said, let me show me the rules. They went, there's nothing in the rules about the size. 2 weeks later, Howard had walked on the court for his lesson with a prototype tennis racket that looked very much like the first Prince racket. Okay, how long had he been working at tennis before he changed the paradigm? 1 hour. 1 hour. By the way, why hadn't anybody else asked that question? Answer, because that's the way you did it in tennis. He didn't have those limitations. Steve Jobs, we talked about it, but notice paradigm shift in music, paradigm shift in phones, and paradigm shift in the larger iPad, basically magazines and books. This is the story that I told the group yesterday I was going to tell. It's a special tinkerer's story. When the first telephones started spreading around the country, it was wildfire. And I mean, telephones were just cropping up everywhere. Came to Kansas City. Almond Stroger was, how can I say this? He had his business was 50% of the business of Kansas City. When the phones came in, what he noticed was there was a pattern of his business going down and his competitors going up. And he looked at them and said, the only way I can explain this is it's got to be the phone company. Okay. Now here's the question, what was his business? He was an undertaker. He was a mortician. Funeral director, right? So he thought it was the telephone company that was causing this. Sounds crazy, right? But he actually went there to test it out. And when he got there, he discovered that he was, in fact, absolutely correct. Okay? The wife of the other undertaker just happened to be the woman who trained all the operators to do their connections. You know, in those days, you'd call and say, connect me to, and they would pull a plug and connect you to the other thing. And what she had been doing was training all the operators. When somebody said, give me the undertaker, who did they always connect to? Her husband. So by the way, he tried to deal with it rationally. He said, look, remember how we used to do it? It was 50% I had and your husband had 50%. Train half your operators to do connect to me, train half to your husband, and then the thing would be fine. She just laughed at him. She knew she had a competitive edge, right? So he went home and defined his problem this way. How can I get my potential clients to me through the phone without running into an operator? This is a mortician now, okay? 3 years later, he filed for his patents that gave us dial telephones and the switching mechanisms that went with it. Tinkerers, people so far outside your field that you don't know what to do with them. Hi, I'm a mortician. I'd like to talk to you about it, making your highest technology. Remember, telephones were the highest technology of the day. So when people say, well, can you identify them? You can't identify them in a logical way, but they're there. What you have to do is listen. You will not be able to identify them by their training. Almond Stroger had no electrical engineering. Not by their affiliations, not by their age, not by their gender, not by their culture. What you have to identify them by is listening to what they're talking about and understanding the concept of paradigms. You can say, they are messing with the rules. I need to hear more of this. They come from everywhere. Okay. Outsiders' advantage. They see with new eyes. They don't know what can't be done. They do not understand the subtleties of the old rules. They have no investment in the rules, and they have nothing to lose. Those are all advantages. They are exactly the reverse for the insiders. They are deeply invested. They perceive dramatic change as a threat to their investment. They think they have everything to lose, and in some cases they're exactly right. And huge peer pressure to stay with the old paradigms. Therefore, if you're counting on where the new paradigms are coming, you should be betting on outsiders. Okay, quick observation. After I talked about this with both Cisco and Marriott, one of the things they both started, Marriott did it first, and then when Cisco heard they were doing it, they did it too. They interview people 2 weeks after they've been hired. And they say to them, do you notice that we're doing something kind of strange or kooky or dumb around here that you just don't understand what we're doing? And then what we teach them to do is be quiet. Let that person talk. And if they realize that you're serious, you really want to hear this, you would be surprised how often they will uncover a practice or a behavior that has no good reason for existing, but it's part of the prevailing paradigm. And therefore we just accept it. So, leadership action. Institutionalize 2-week reviews. Create a sanctuary for wild ideas so people can go and talk outside the paradigm. Allow your people to explore beyond the boundaries of your organization. And eliminate subtle reprisals. That one is probably the most difficult, because sometimes people say, well, you can go do that, but you're in trouble when you come back. So you have to make sure that people are safe when they do that exploration. Question number 3, how do shifting paradigms affect those who go through it? Now this is one that has to do with the personal impact of the paradigm shift. We see the world anew. All paradigms act as filters through which we see the world. Think about what a filter does. It sorts, and it sorts out, and it sorts in. When it sorts in, it concentrates on one side, and it takes away the stuff on the other side. And that's exactly what your paradigms do with the data that you look at, the world that you see. So literally, when you change your paradigm, you have a different set of filters for looking at the world. Therefore, you see different things. This is the least worst response that is the paradigm effect. You make a suggestion, somebody says, oh, that's impossible. Or we don't do that around here. Or if you've been here as long as I have been, you would understand that that's a really crazy idea. Those are very soft ways of closing off the discussion for the new paradigm. And by the way, these are the most damaging because they're really easy to say. Worst case is we see best what we are supposed to see, and poorly or not at all that which is not inside our boundaries. In other words, we look but we do not see. We listen but we do not hear. Somebody with a different paradigm, what is completely obvious to them is invisible to you. By the way, have you ever had that experience talking to someone who is smart and thoughtful, and you are just miles apart on the way you're seeing the problem or the way it should be dealt with? If that's happening, my guess it's about paradigm. All right. So, we think about our leaders. Think about the paradigms they were practicing at the time. Those predictions are predictable. But they were wrong because in almost every case it was a paradigm shift that occurred to change it. So, leadership actions. Make sure everyone can understand how paradigms can blind them to new possibilities. You must make people conscious of that in order for them to be able to avoid it. Now, a couple of things I'll just take you through and give you a couple of examples and then we'll wrap this up. This is a paradigm test. How many of you see the 4 dots that define the corners of that square? Raise your hand if you can see that. Okay, here's your problem. I'm going to give you 15 seconds to solve it. Move 2 of those 4 dots and create a square twice as large as the one we're looking at. Move 2 of those 4 dots, thus creating the corners of a new square twice as large. Okay, and as soon as you got that solved, raise your hand. Okay. 5 more seconds. Okay, how many are struggling with this a little bit? Raise your hand if you're struggling a little bit. Good. By the way, I like that because that's honest. You know, you guys said, not me. You know. Okay, this is the solution. Take that upper corner, move it to the bottom down there. Take the inside one, it's now at the apex of the points or of the lines, and move it out to that, and you have a square twice as large. In fact, it's provable because it's 2 triangles, 4 triangles. So it's geometrically provable. For those of you who are struggling, how many of you were trying to keep the lines parallel? Raise your hand if you're trying to keep going. Did I tell you to do that? I didn't, did I? Your square paradigm did it. Now, I've run this several different ways, and if I say, make a diamond twice as large as the square, almost everybody gets it in about 10 seconds. But it's a square, isn't it? 4 equal sides. This is the way paradigms influence us. It's subtle, it's clever, it's unrecognizable sometimes, but we see things that way. We think, oh, it's got to be parallel. No, it didn't have to be, but that's how we set it up. All right, let me give you some examples of paradigm shifts. Frequent flyer miles. Please notice, that did not require any special technology. It was just a great idea. And it changed the loyalty structure of airlines around the world. Microloans, made to the poor, by the way. And one other point to make, one person started this whole thing. Again, this is not about technology. It's about believing that poor people are a decent risk and figuring out how to educate them about money and keep your information exchange cheap enough so that you can loan $12 or $20 or $35. When the bankers heard about microloans, they just laughed. They said, you can't make any money on that. Well, that's not the point. The point is, I love the last part, the poor are better risk than the rich in terms of pay back their loans. This is called nano paper, invented by the Swedes. They basically took cellulosic particles of fairly big size, ground them down to nano-sized particles, it's still paper, and when they tested the strength, it was as strong as iron, made out of paper. Somebody's playing with the rules. Somebody is changing the boundaries. Stanford has announced a paper battery. Take ordinary Xerox paper, coat it with nanotubes ink, some silver nanowire. It can be both what's called a supercapacitor, which means you can charge it up and it will release power very rapidly, and it can also be an extremely viable battery, layered one piece of paper at a time. That's not the way we think about batteries. Those are not the rules for doing batteries. We may have these in our cars in 4 or 5 years. This is the Germans producing vegetarian meat. Can you feel a change in boundaries on that one? Vegetarian meat, I won't even say anymore. This is a high-speed solar aircraft. Now I want you to notice the word high-speed. Solar airship. These things aren't supposed to go fast. But what they figured out is if you float them up to 30,000 feet, you can get in the jet stream and ride a 100+ mile-an-hour wind, and it looks like they'll be able to deliver 120,000 pounds of material coming in at 180 miles an hour. Think about what that does for the whole transportation system around the world. By the way, the black stuff on the top is solar cells that capture the sun and spin the electric motors to drive it forward. So it has a very, very low carbon footprint. For those of you who have Apple Siri, you know what that is about in terms of the paradigm shift. You are now to the point where you can talk to your phone and say, would you find out for me the weather report for Slovenia for this week? And it'll pull it up. It knows what you're saying. Paradigm shift in terms of communication. This is the surgical robot. This is the Da Vinci. Think of what it's changed in terms of both the cleanliness, number one, the small holes that it goes through, number two, and the amazingly small equipment at the end that allows it to do things you cannot do with your fingers. Paradigm shift. All right. Yep, I can. Yep. Question number 4. What happens to those individuals and organizations who don't go through the shift? Well, I talked about going back to zero. When a paradigm shifts, everybody goes back to zero. You may be the biggest thing in the old paradigm. It doesn't guarantee anything in the new. Look at a couple of examples. When Walmart started their growth, Sears looked at them and said, boy, are they silly. We know you can't grow from the rural areas, so we don't have to worry about them. What did Walmart know? They had a monopoly position in the rural areas, and therefore they could do things you couldn't do otherwise. So while Sears was basically ignoring Walmart because it could never lead anywhere, Walmart basically ate them up. And if you take a look at the two today, you know, Sears is barely existing. Walmart is now one of the biggest companies in the world. That was Walmart putting Sears back to zero. Motorola, this is a StarTAC. Anybody have a StarTAC back in the 90s? Wasn't that a great phone? I just loved my StarTAC. Okay. 1994, Motorola had more than 40% of the cell phone sales worldwide. 1994, AT&T brought out their first digital network. AT&T called up Motorola and says, can you build us a digital phone? AT&T said, Motorola said, well, we've been working on it. Sure, we got lots of stuff. They said, good, we'll come by and take a look at one, a couple of months from now. AT&T shows up a couple of months, they can show us your digital phone. They said, no, we're not going to build it for you. AT&T said, well, why? They said, the voice quality isn't good enough. We are known for our voice quality. This would damage our Six Sigma reputation if we brought out something with the digital mediocre quality. So until we can meet our analog voice quality, we're not going to bring out a digital phone. By the way, have we ever met analog voice quality? I don't think so. AT&T was in a panic. They put out a call, an RFP. Who's got a digital phone? A little company named Nokia answered and said, we've got one. By the way, 4 years later, Nokia was in the driver's seat in terms of world market share in digital phones, and Motorola was falling off. That's being put back to zero. The digital change put Motorola, the dominant cell phone maker, well, they are back to zero. Didn't Google buy them? CFLs and LEDs put incandescent lights back to zero, right? Same thing. And this has just happened. When's the last time you shot film? Okay. The digital revolution, digital phones, Kodak is for all intents and purposes out of the picture business. I don't even think you're going to do digital cameras anymore. All right. Ask what changes could put your organization back to zero so that all competitive advantages you have today become non-factors. That's a question you really should be asking yourself. What could put us back to zero? By the way, who should do that if it's going to happen? You should put yourself back to zero if you can. So wouldn't you rather continue serving your customer, and that's what it's all about. All right, so there are two kinds of change leaders have to deal with. Paradigm enhancement change, that is, take what we have and make it better, and we're actually very good at that. The other is identifying paradigm shifts and being responsive to them. You as a leader must be good at both. Here's a question that I use, and this is actually a shortcut to having the paradigm discussion. What is impossible to do in your field, but if you could do it, would fundamentally change it for the better? That's a question you can actually ask field of expertise by field of expertise, department by department in your organization. Here's what's interesting about this question. To answer it, you must answer in paradigm language. What's impossible to do? If it's impossible, it's outside your boundaries. So all of a sudden, we've taken you outside your boundaries. If you could do it, it would fundamentally change your business for the better. Not trivially, not a little bit, a bunch. And so this is a question you can actually sit down and start talking to people with, and their answers will be within the context of what we've been talking about, paradigm shift answers. I had a client who asked this question 4 years ago. What if we could make every one of our products smart? 4 years ago it was impossible. Okay? This year they're going to be doing it. So what was impossible 4 years ago now is fundamentally changing the business. All right, we wrap up. What are the reasons for resisting paradigms? They show up sooner than needed. They are brought by an outsider. They require intuitive judgment because you have to judge them while you're still in peace. They change the way you see the world. As a leader, if you understand these things, you will be far more open to receiving the paradigm shift than someone who does not understand. So what you want to avoid is paradigm paralysis. What you want to develop is paradigm pliancy, which is purposeful flexing of your paradigms in your organization to take a look at alternative ways, to stay ready for the real one when it shows up. Last thoughts, you manage within a paradigm, you lead between paradigms. You manage within a paradigm, you lead between paradigms. Makes sense, doesn't it? What do we ask our managers to do? Basically to optimize the paradigm. What do we ask leaders to do? To find the new paradigm. A leader is someone you choose to follow to a place you would not go by yourself. That's what a new paradigm looks like. Those who think it can't be done should get out of the way of those who are doing it. You can and should shape your own future, because if you don't, someone else surely will. Thank you very much for listening.